Hello, how are you? It's me, ASMR Classic 1. Again, I realised we're ASMR Classic 1 because there's another ASMR Classic, so sorry if you're ASMR Classic, I do apologise. Yes, we're ASMR Classic 1, and let's get rid of this for a moment. So, I slightly teased you with a short. Sorry to be a tease, but I gather in order to qualify as a proper YouTuber, you have to have shorts. And I don't mean the sort that you wear, which I'm not at the moment, so I won't go there. I don't want to do that. I'm trying to relax you, not frighten you. But this is a book I mentioned in my tease. It's actually in the wrong bag. I do believe I've got two of these, and it's a book that's I bought from our local Notting Hill bookshop. I keep saying Notting Hill, don't I? It's actually Chiswick. You'll see the book mark in a moment. They're a new little book shop. Excuse me, I'm still sniffing. Choose books. Hashtag choose bookshops. And then I was at the Edinburgh Festival in Edinburgh, would you believe? In August, and I made the mistake, and it is a mistake, it's a terrible place to go. Oh, it was the shock of talking about the Edinburgh Festival, I think. I'm recording this on my phone, and it suddenly went weird, and out of focus, as you just saw. Sorry about that. Yes, it was the shock of being at the Edinburgh International Book Festival. I'm glad they've moved it back to August. I think for a while it went to another time of the year. I think the film festival did the same thing. Although I have to say I was at Edinburgh one year with a short film in the Edinburgh International Film Festival, which was mainly held at Glasgow, and a new play that I'd written in the Edinburgh Fringe, as it's known. And that was a very busy year, crikey. But anyway, I was there I was in the bookshop minding my own business, and then I came across this. But this is the book. So I hope that wasn't too loud. By the international best-selling author, as you can see, Dan Jones. And it's all about Henry V, the warrior king who everyone's heard of. And I wrote an adaptation of Shakespeare's Henry V back in 1992. And it kind of changed my life, really. We did it for one night in my native town, and it got picked up and taken to the Edinburgh Festival, where people were very, eventually, kind. It did quite well. Let me move this out of the way. It did very well. I was quite pleased with the show, and it went to America, and also gave me the idea for accessible theatre. So I got involved in setting up the theatre company. And the reason that we want to try and make this YouTube channel work is that if we can get to 1,000 followers, also if you're not a subscriber, by the way, down here somewhere, isn't you probably know better than me. Sorry, my technicals aren't working particularly well, as you can probably gather. Difficult using an iPhone. Not quite sure why it kept going. Anyway, it did. This is the book that I wanted to share with you. As I say, I've actually got 2 copies of this, I do believe. And the one I've got back at my flat is actually signed by Dan Jones. But, as I say, it's Henry V is a big character in my life, and if you'd like to subscribe to this channel, you'd also be a big character in my life. As I was saying, the thing's down here somewhere, isn't it? You know, the subscribe button. I gather you can also hit the triangle or something, which lets you know when there's a new episode, because I'm going to be good. Also, coming up, because we're heading towards the festive season, another story I'm very familiar with, and I did an adaptation of, is Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. So we'll be looking at that. I might actually read some of the original to just to get you in the festive mood. But let's have a little look at this one. So, I'm exploring this with you for the first time, apart from the cover. Wildly gripping, swashbuckling, battle-scarred and blood-spattered, in equal parts ferocious, dynamic, and political, intimate and humane, the best biography yet of England's greatest king, Simon Sebag Montefiore. And of course, he wasn't king for very long, as we'll find out in a minute. I like this quote. Yet another Dan Jones book that I wish I had written. One of England's greatest medieval kings gets the biography he deserves from one of our greatest medieval historians. That is, of course, Dan Snow, who himself is no shake as a historian, rather good historian. The king of exciting narrative history triumphs again, a masterclass in making the medieval addictively readable. Lucy Wellesley, again, TV presenter and historian. And then, with his customary combination of profound scholarship and fine narrative verse, Dan Jones brings Henry V to life better than anyone since Shakespeare himself. That's by Andrew Roberts. So, critically, very well considered. So let's have a quick look inside. This tells you a bit about the book. I'd say it's a new book, and I should also say as well, I've bought this. It's not a promotional thing or anything like that. It was a book I wanted to read, and I thought I'd share it with you. And here's a bit of the truth about him. Henry V reigned over England for only 9 years and 4 months, and died at the age of just 35. But he looms over the landscape of the late Middle Ages and beyond. The victor of Agincourt was remembered as the Academy of Kingship, a model to be closely imitated by his successors. William Shakespeare deployed Henry V as a study in youthful folly, redirected to sober statesmanship. Henry's version, Henry's journey from Henry IV, of course, to Henry V. In the dark days of World War II, Henry's victories in France were presented by British filmmakers as exemplars for a people existentially threatened by Nazism. Churchill called Henry a gleam of splendour in the dark, troubled story of medieval England, while for one modern medievalist, I said that right, medievalist, Henry was quite simply the greatest man who ever ruled England. So for Dan Jones, let me move this out of the way, sorry. For Dan Jones, Henry is one of the most intriguing characters in all medieval history, but one of the hardest to pin down. A hardened warrior, yet also bookish and artistic, a leader who made many mistakes, yet always triumphed when it mattered. As king, he saved his shattered country from economic ruin, and in foreign diplomacy made England a serious player once more. Yet through his conquests in northern France, he sowed the seeds for calamity at home in the form of the Wars of the Roses, which of course we all know happened. Dan Jones' Life of Henry V stands out for the generous amount of space it allots to his long royal apprenticeship, the critical first 26 years of his life before he became king. It is an enthralling portrait of a man with a rare ability to force his will on the world, but above all, it is an unmissable account of England's greatest king from our best-selling medieval historian. And as you can see, it cost me £25. So, let's have a little, shall we have a little delve in? How we do? I think we're okay for time. This is a bit about Dan Jones, the writer. Dan Jones is the Sunday Times and New York Times best-selling author of many non-fiction books, including The Plantagenets, The Templars, and Powers and Thrones. He's a renowned writer, broadcaster, and journalist. He's presented dozens of TV shows, including the Netflix series Secrets of Great British Castles, and writes and hosts the podcast This Is History. Oh, I didn't know that. I shall have to look him up. He's a fellow of the Royal Historical Society. Of course he would be. Alan Jones. Yeah, the stuff that he's written. Summer of Blood, the Peasants' Revolt of 1381. The Plantagenets, the kings who made England. The Hollow Crown, the War of the Roses, and the Rise of the Tudors. I think the RSC did a thing called the Hollow Crown. Magna Carta, the making and legacy of the Great Charter. I quite like the fact that if you go to the British Library in London, they've got a copy of the Magna Carta kind of sitting there, right, covered up obviously, but it was, I felt it was surprisingly casual given that it was arguably the start of civil rights, arguably. Realm Divided, a year in the life of Plantagenet England. The Templars, the rise and fall of God's holy warriors. Crusaders, an epic history of the war for the Holy Lands. Powers and Thrones, a new history of the Middle Ages. And obviously with Marina Amarov, if I said that right, I hope. The Colour of Time, a new history of the world, 1850 to 1960. Wow, that sounds interesting. The World Aflame, the Long War, 1914 to 1945. Also sounds very interesting. You know, the First World War started in 1914 and finished in 1918. And of course we had the 39-45 war, didn't we? Bless what they're saying, the Long War. A Woman's World, 1850 to 1960, that'd be interesting as well. And then fiction works, The Tale of the Tailor and the Three Dead Kings, Essex Dogs and Wolves of Winter. Quite a provocative title, isn't it? And then the frontispiece, which, as it says here, is The Astonishing Rise of England's Greatest Warrior King. And it's an Apollo book, published by Head Zeus. That's all the copyright stuff. 4D. I wonder who D is. So, gosh, Perversus Rhythmici. Many times he read his books, surrendered to hard work. The king was brave, an archer. All idleness he shrugged. The Perversus Rhythmici of Henry V. Fellas, let's go. Henry V. 25th of October, 1415. And of course, I think 1415 was the Battle of Agincourt. So we'll just have a quick look through the contents as well, so you can either just relax or, listen to what's coming up. Part 1, The Prince, the boy in the black straw hat, the Prince of Peace. Behold, I will open your graves. Rough Justice, fair cousin, a man is ruling Prince of Wales, great pain and diligence, his miraculous power, crimes and punishments. Virtuous Prince, coups and councils, holy fire, ballads and brawls. Sounds good. The storm of descending, sons of iniquity. This is the Prince from 1386 to 1430. And then the second part of the book is The King, from 1413 to 1422. A different man, false friends, the road to war, fickle and capricious fortune, fires of hell, his little blessed many, triumphs feared by everybody. Who is the great lord? This unlusty soldier's life. Things are different now. A long battle. Ah, Clarence. To Jerusalem, epilogue, virtue conquers all. And some notes, obviously. Image credits, bibliography, an index. I'm never quite sure whether I can show images on here, but we'll have a quick look at these maps, perhaps. Particularly if you're listening in England or Britain, United Kingdom, as it is now, because this is England, Wales and Ireland in the early 15th century. And it's quite interesting immediately. Oops, crikey. Because obviously there's France over the waters. Battle of Agincourt, of course. I'm sorry about that noisy desk. But what's interesting is that being from the Midlands, there's no Birmingham. Birmingham is Britain's second city. but it didn't exist in the 15th century. It's a much later city than that, but it's very near to Coventry, Kenilworth and Warwick. Stratford-upon-Avon was around here as well, but that's quite a small town. In fact, I think Kenilworth features quite heavily in the story of Henry V. And then over here, of course, we've got Ireland, Dublin, Wexford, Waterford, where the crystal comes from. So, yeah, my folks were from further out here, not on this map. County Mayo, that's where my folks are from. But it is quite interesting, as I say, the fact that Birmingham isn't on the map. But these towns were Kenilworth Castle, of course, and Warwick Castle is still a lovely thing to do. Oxford's here, of course, and obviously, of course, London, Windsor. Yes, if you get a chance to go to the Midlands, in the English Midlands, it's well worth a visit. Hereford's here, of course, very much in Wales. Shrewsbury, Aberystwyth, a place I'm going to very soon, in fact. And then over here, we have France in the early 15th century, which I know very little about, apart from there's Paris. This was Calais, and of course I think for a while England, it was England in those days, owned Calais, of course. And the Battle of Agincourt was marked here. That's where it all happened in 1415. Luxembourg in the Holy Roman Empire, of course, yes. Wow. And I'll just give you the first paragraph, the introduction. The doctor is nervous. John Bradmore is the best surgeon in England. He has a famous practice in London. He attends on rich and powerful clients, including the king. He has the supreme self-confidence, bordering on arrogance, common to elite surgeons since the days of the ancient Greeks. But this case is different. And looking at the time, we might leave Dan Jones and Henry V there. I shall delve into it again. This was the bookshop everybody reads, a new bookshop in Chiswick in West London, on the High Road. That's where I bought this from, as I say, Chiswick. Hammersmith, of course, is nearby as well. And it's not a sponsored thing. I bought it. I just thought I'd share it with you. I hope you found that vaguely interesting and hopefully relaxing, as well as I keep mentioning I discovered ASMR when I had COVID, and it was great. It was good, and I tend still to fall asleep most nights with ASMR. And if there's anything you'd like me to, anything you'd like me to have a look at, then please do let me know. So we are going to start the Christmas tale soon. Yes. Scrooge is going to be making an appearance soon, because we're getting near to the festive season as I record this anyway. Of course, you may be listening to this at any other time, which is one of the glories of the internet. And if you haven't subscribed, if you wouldn't mind pressing the little button down here somewhere, because that's, as I say, we're hoping to get to 1,000 subscribers, and it means we can create some original stuff, original writing, which would be exciting. All it remains for me to do now, though, as always, is say thank you very much for your company. I hope you have a lovely time, whatever you're doing. And to quote, of course, Charles Dickens from A Christmas Carol, bless us all, everyone.